Alright, so today I want to show you some of the more visually dominant genes in ball pythons. Those genes that when you work them in with other combinations that can have a really strong effect as far as dominating the visual appearance. And some of these genes can be a challenge to work with. Sometimes you have to actually pick the right combinations to mix them into to create really impressive results. And in some cases, it pretty much dominates everything, wiping out the color and pattern of pretty much any other gene that you work in with the combination. So today I want to jump over the internet and I want to show you a few of these really visually dominant ball python genes. Alright, so I want to jump over here on Morphmarket.com and I want to start with this snake right here. This is a blue-eyed leucistic, an all-white snake with blue eyes. And I pretty much consider this to be the #1 king of visual dominance. You can pretty much work any other gene into the blue-eyed leucistic and it'll completely wipe it out and you won't see it at all in there, especially with the really super bright white ones like this one. This one's actually the combination of the lesser Mojave, which is pretty much the ideal blue-eyed leucistic. There's actually like 40 different ways you can make a blue-eyed leucistic. As a matter of fact, you can actually make some purplish colored ones. Say for example, if you actually took the Mojave and you bred it to a Mystic, you'd actually get the Mystic Potion, which is kind of a purplish colored blue-eyed leucistic. You can actually see some pattern coming through, and if you actually work other genes into the Mystic Potions or the Purple Passions, some of the purple colored blue-eyed leucistics, sometimes you can see a little bit of an influence from other genes, but I'd say in most cases, if you have a blue-eyed leucistic, it's extremely visually dominant, pretty much #1 on the list. So as far as #2, I would consider that to be the albino. And when it comes to albino, it's kind of interesting because when we talk about visual dominance, there's really two factors. There's the color of the snake and then the patterns. Some genes actually really affect the patterns where they're really visually dominant from the patterns. And I'd say as far as the albino, it's really dominant as far as the color. You pretty much can't break anything through the color of an albino. And that's kind of the cool thing about the albino. Even though it's really visually dominant as far as the color, a lot of times you can see the patterns coming through and you can make some pretty amazing combinations. And when it comes to albinos, I'd say as far as the color dominance, it pretty much works the same with all the different versions of the albino. So this is like the regular albino, and then you have, for example, you actually have the caramel albino or the lavender albino or the ultramels or the rainbows, all those different versions of kind of albino looking snakes. It has a really strong visual effect as far as the color. And take a look at this. You can actually take an albino, which is #2, and you can mix it with the all-white snake, #1. Kind of a battle of the dominance. And this is what you actually get. You get the cherry bomb. And the cherry bomb is kind of interesting. It actually is pretty much an all-white snake. You can see #1 pretty much dominates, but you can actually see the albino breaking through a little bit in the color of the cherry bomb. As a matter of fact, you can actually see these really bright eyes, and that gives it away. There's definitely albino in the mix. So take a look at this thing. This is a champagne. I would consider this to pretty much be the #3 most visually dominant. And this one could be a little bit more challenging because instead of really having a dominance as far as the color, it can dominate the pattern. A lot of times when you work other genes into the champagne, a lot of times you'll actually get a completely patternless snake, or sometimes you'll get this little, like the champagne pattern, the little dots right along the ridge. But as far as a lot of the other genes kind of breaking through from their patterns, a lot of times it's a little bit challenging. And a lot of times when you work other genes in the champagne, you definitely see a color difference. It's mainly, I'd say, in most cases, it's a really strong influence as far as dominating the pattern. So take a look at this. You can actually take champagne, which is #3, work it into albino, which is #2, and you can definitely see which one wins as far. It's kind of interesting in this because it's almost like a tie, I would say. The albino definitely dominates the color of the snake, but when it comes to champagne, you can definitely see the champagne pattern coming through and pretty much wiping out all the pattern of the albino. And that's kind of the characteristic of the champagne. It pretty much dominates the pattern and the albino dominates the color. It's kind of an interesting tie between the albino and the champagne. So here is the banana. The banana is also really visually dominant when you're working in a lot of combinations. And I'd say when you work it into some combinations, it's really forgiving as far as both the pattern and the color. Sometimes you can get a reduction in the banana color, and a lot of times it'll really let a lot of the other patterns from the other jeans really shine through. So you can really make some impressive banana combinations. It's not really as challenging as some of the other combinations. It's a really amazing jean. So take a look at this. You can actually take the banana, work it into the champagne, and take a look at what you get. It's kind of an interesting combination. You can definitely see the champagne is breaking through with the pattern of the champagne. Pretty much wipes out all the pattern of the banana, but the banana actually dominates the color. It's kind of an interesting mix between the two. So here's the pinstripe. I'd say the pinstripe is kind of in the middle. Sometimes it can be pretty visually dominant when you're working it into other jeans. And a lot of times the pinstripe will actually be a little bit more forgiving than some of the really visually dominant jeans. So take a look at this. You can actually take the pinstripe, work it into the banana. This is kind of interesting because the pinstripe is really visually dominant as far as the pattern, and then the banana is dominant as far as the color. Sometimes you can actually work these together depending on if you want, you know, the color dominance or the pattern dominance in some of your combinations. So these are pretty much all these. I think it was 5 that I covered here are pretty much the most common jeans in ball pythons. There's actually a few that are newcomers in ball pythons. And take a look at this one. This is pretty interesting. This is the monsoon, and I've kind of had my eyes on the monsoons, but the problem is there's not a whole lot of them over here on Morphmarket. If you look at the prices, they're crazy. This monsoon actually sold for $15,000. Not really that popular yet. Of course, you know, some people may be producing quite a few in private collections, maybe not posting them over here on Morphmarket. Sometimes that happens. But as far as everything I've seen on the monsoon, it seems like it's extremely visually dominant as far as working other jeans into the combinations. And it's kind of hard to tell on some of these new jeans because there's not a whole lot of examples working other jeans into the mix. So take a look at this. I actually pulled up a male calico Mojave right here. I actually found a monsoon with the calico Mojave mixed into it. And I kind of wanted to show you this so you can see kind of what the looks like without the monsoon. So if you can imagine what this looks like with the monsoon, it's kind of interesting. Take a look at this. It really visually dominates the calico Mojave. This is the calico Mojave monsoon. Pretty much completely wipes it out. And there's only, I think there was only like maybe 6 monsoons over here or something like that. You know, so sometimes you don't know if the ID is 100% accurate or if it's just reacting with the calico and the Mojave this way, and maybe all the other jeans are a little bit different. So sometimes it's really hard to know the visual dominance unless you see it mixed with all the other jeans. And a lot of times you'll actually find, you know, some jeans work, you know, it's kind of tough to work just these few jeans in with the combination, and sometimes it's the majority of jeans, and it really depends on, you know, all the different combinations. And with the monsoon, there's not a whole lot over here, so I'd say it's still kind of up in the air as far as how visually dominant the monsoon really is. So here is the sunset, and the sunset can be pretty visually dominant. It's a little bit more forgiving, I'd say, than the champagne, maybe on par with the banana. It's kind of interesting, maybe a little bit more visually dominant between the banana. As far as the ranking goes, it's kind of hard to rank them because some affect the color and some affect the pattern. And this one's pretty interesting because sometimes it dominates the color and sometimes it dominates the pattern. So take a look at this. I actually pulled this one up. This is actually a combination of the banana and the sunset. So this is a really interesting combination. You can see the banana really dominates the sunset as far as the color. You know, you can definitely tell it has a really strong visual effect on the pattern, which is kind of interesting. So I actually pulled one more up here with the sunset. I just wanted to show you one more example of the visual dominance of the sunset, and that is with the clown. And the clown, I'd say, is pretty much the king of combos when it comes to recessive mutations. Let me tell you, if you can actually find something new, mix it in with the clown and make some impressive combinations, a lot of times it can really take off. So here's what happens if you work the sunset into the clown. Take a look at this, how visually dominant the sunset just really dominates the clown as far as a lot of the, as a matter of fact, it's a lot of just the color on this one, you can actually see a lot of the pattern of the clown still breaking through. So it's kind of an interesting combination between the two. So sometimes you have to actually look at when you're talking about the visual dominance, there's definitely two components. There's the color component and the pattern component. All right, so it is time for the question of the day. And Lupita Mata asks, is Bobby just a straight bamboo, or does he have any other genes in the mix? And that is a very good question. So the snake that I have around my neck here, this is Bobby, my 7-year-old male bamboo, and he's just a bamboo, no other genes. And speaking of visual dominance, the bamboo can be really visually dominant. A lot of times when you work bamboo into other combinations, a lot of times it'll really overwhelm the color, and you end up with the color of the bamboo. And I think the strength of the bamboo is really just a single standalone gene. Pretty much looks the most impressive just by himself. He's a pretty awesome gene. You actually take a ball python like Bobby here, you breed it to a normal, half the offsprings come out as bamboo. Pretty awesome. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.